Now this is just ridiculous. Sydney's ecological footprint, and that is the area to supply the energy and materials needed to absorb human consumption and wastes, is 150 times greater than the Sydney area. The ecological footprint depends on the number of people. And this is really an important point to understand. It doesn't decrease if the city gets denser. And secondly, the actual urbanized areas of Australia occupy less than 0.3% of the land area. If the New South Wales Department of Planning manages to double Sydney's residential density, and that's a situation horrific to most people, Sydney's 45-kilometre cross-section would only be reduced by some 5 kilometres. Negligible. The pain would not be worth the gain. And I think it's plain to see that Sydney-siders are already experiencing lots of pain in relation to what the government planners call urban consolidation, which is more correctly called urban densification. The reality is that it's much more like urban destruction, what with all the demolition taking place in many areas of Sydney. Much of the city's heritage is being destroyed in the process. In addition, much valued urban bushland within the city is also being destroyed. It's amazing that we can be conned into believing such politically correct, too short of land rubbish.
Okay, Tony, I think you've won me over regarding the problems of urban consolidation, or densification as you call it. But what about the problem of housing affordability? Won't the construction of more apartments like these reduce the cost of housing for people, even if they have to accept not having a backyard or a garden where their children can play?
Well, Ted, the question really highlights the biggest problem with these crazy policies. Since the onset of urban densification across Sydney, house prices have rocketed. Policies that restrict the supply of land must result in a shortage and cause a scarcity. As any economist can tell you, scarcity causes prices to rise. The cost of land for a house has risen much more than the cost of actually building the house. An increase in house prices may seem okay to those of us lucky enough to already own a house. But what about those people who do not? The low-income households, the young, future generations. Sydney is now less affordable than most major cities around the world. And in order of decreasing cost, the following cities are rated: number 1, Los Angeles, which is the most expensive. Then number 2 comes San Diego. Number 3 is Sydney. Then after Sydney comes San Francisco, cheaper than Sydney. Number 5, Miami, cheaper than Sydney. Number 6, New York, cheaper than Sydney. So Sydney's in the very big league indeed, and for most people a very unfortunate one. It's hard to believe that Sydney housing is now more expensive than New York. What's really significant is that the cities subjected to urban densification policies have the most unaffordable houses. So make no mistake, urban densification results in much higher housing costs. When you analyse the reasons given for high density that they are forcing upon us, you'll find they are completely spurious. The benefits they claim for high density are hogwash. If something is not true, it's simply not true. And no amount of wishful thinking, no amount of spin, no amount of lies will make it true.
I can see that you're certainly very passionate about this problem and quite angry about the way that urban consolidation is being sold to us by many planners, governments and business interests. There also seems to be a lot of research to back up what you're saying.
Thanks very much for taking the time to speak with me, Ted. I hope that this will provide some solid evidence to people, particularly to those living in Sydney and Melbourne, as to what is really taking place as a result of urban densification policies.